Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 2, Episode 12, The Royale. This was suggested to me by my friend Luke, who I think just loves to torture me because this episode is famously a bit of a joke. And obviously, I'm kidding around because episodes that are a joke are kind of my bread and butter. So thanks, Luke. And I probably would have gotten to this eventually anyway. But I was also a little hesitant to do a video for this one because it's already been made fun of by a lot of different people over the years. And I think they probably made fun of it better than I will. But I guess we'll see. And maybe I should have watched other videos about this episode first just to make sure I'm not aping anyone. I just hope I'm not. Again, I guess we'll see. And overall, I think it's just kind of a nothing episode. I think that might be the best way to describe it. Just a nonsense Season 2 episode. But its absurdity is what makes it very funny at times. And I think we should just jump right in. The episode opens up with the Enterprise exploring an uncharted solar system, which is pretty common. That's kind of what they do. A passing Klingon ship reported that they discovered debris from a strange vessel in the atmosphere of a nearby planet. So the Enterprise heads to investigate. Geordi says the planet is uninhabitable. It has ammonia tornadoes and a surface temperature of minus 291 degrees Celsius, which is colder than absolute zero, which is impossible. So that's interesting. You'd think they would be asking questions about that. You know, how is that possible? But they never ask any questions about that. And I also don't know why Geordi is reporting this. It doesn't seem like planetary analysis falls under his job description. I would think that would be more Data's thing. But it's still Season 2, and they maybe weren't exactly sure what Geordi's role is supposed to be. Because remember, he went from helmsman to chief engineer in one season. But either way, they found the debris, and they decide to beam some of it up so they can get a closer look, which seems irregular. I mean, can't they just scan it? But if they did that, we wouldn't get this dramatic reveal. It says NASA on the side of the wreckage. How exciting. And how convenient. The one piece they beamed up had perfectly legible writing on it that tells them exactly what they need to know. It's from Earth, obviously, and from the mid-21st century. And Wesley reports that scans have picked up a structure on the planet, and it seems habitable. So Riker, Worf, and Data beam down, and it looks like complete darkness with a glowing fart cloud overhead, as you do. And you know, can they, for once, just not put total blind faith in their scans and just beam down in an environmental suit once in a while? Like, just out of an abundance of caution. This planet is colder than absolute zero. And now that I'm thinking about it, I don't think Next Generation ever showed environmental suits. I think it could be the only Star Trek show that doesn't have them. I could be wrong about that, but I can't think of an episode where they had spacesuits in Next Generation. Anyway, Worf looks at a random revolving door and says, "What's that?" Well, Worf, it appears to be a fucking door. And Picard advises them to proceed with caution. Yeah, you wouldn't want to get tripped up by one of those spinny doors. Those things are awfully dangerous. So they head through it, and they end up in a shitty-looking casino hotel. I mean, I've seen Atlantic City casinos that were stained with blood and semen that looked nicer than this place. Although, this place probably smells a little better. I'll give it that. And the ship lost contact with the away team as soon as they went through the door. Picard orders the transporter room to beam them up, but they can't. There's some kind of bubble shield that's preventing them from locking on. And Riker decides they might as well have a look around before heading back through the treacherous doors. So what do? Naturally, they check in at the front desk like it's a normal vacation. And the assistant manager of the Hotel Royale says they were expected. And then some hot-headed bellhop comes storming in, and he asks about a woman named Rita. And the assistant manager says, she's Mickey D's girl now. And then the bellhop says, he's not afraid of Mickey D. Am I to understand that there is some kind of gangster named Mickey D. What does he look like? I mean, we're all picturing it, right? So, apparently, there's a gangster in town who will steal your girl and ask if you want to try 2 apple pies for $1. Is this a Royale with cheese? Who knows? I hope the McDonald's people don't come after me over this, but if they do, I know exactly what to tell them. I learned everything I need to know from Cleo McDowell. In any case, they get their room keys and some complimentary gambling chips, so that's nice. And Data reports that there's no life signs from anyone in the casino. And Worf says, "You mean they're not alive?" I love it. Worf is just like, "Oh, you mean they're zombies? Perfect. I've trained on the holodeck for this exact situation." But unfortunately, they're not zombies, so Worf has to pump the brakes a little bit. Turns out they do exist, sort of, but they just don't register on the tricorder as alive, whatever that means. Data points to a specific person and says this.
Take this creature, for example. He does not exhibit any DNA structure.
Excuse me, son. Look who's talking. And you sound just like my ex-wife. All right. Time to get down to business.
So apparently his ex-wife is really cutthroat with those insults, saying people don't have any fucking DNA structure. I mean, that's gotta hurt. And I like how he responds by saying, "Look who's talking." It's almost like he knows Data doesn't have any DNA either. And on the Enterprise, Picard wonders why the away team didn't immediately return to the beam down coordinates when they lost contact. Troy doesn't seem to think there's anything wrong, though, because she can sense Riker is feeling amused. So let me get this straight. The sensors can't detect Riker, but Troy can? She can sense Riker's emotional state on the surface of a planet while she's in orbit above it. I mean, I know she's exhibited this ability before this and after this, but doesn't it sound kind of nuts? Like, how does Betazoid society even function? You'd think they would just be constantly hearing noise, kind of like the Borg Collective. At any rate, Data sits down to play a round of blackjack. He's apparently amazing at it, but he has trouble beating Riker at poker. Riker always wins at poker against a woman who can read emotions, a guy who can see the fucking cards, and an android who can count the cards. I guess it's just because he's too cool and handsome to lose. Anyway, back on the Enterprise, Geordi and Wesley are working on a way to get through to the away team. And Picard asks this.
I'm comparing the molecular integrity of that bubble against our phasers.
Is penetration possible?
I don't know just yet. It may be an option.
I don't know if penetration is possible. Riker's on the surface, and Captain Kirk isn't here. So who knows? It could be touch and go. I really don't have much more to say about this scene. I just wanted to include that because, frankly, there's not a lot going on, and I need to fill some time with some juvenile bullshit. Also, go back and listen to how Geordi says molecular, because I don't think he pronounced it right. He said molecular or something like that. It was very strange. But moving on, something does actually happen, kind of. The away team finally tries to leave the hotel, and they can't. They go through the revolving door, only to end up back in the lobby/casino. So they're trapped. Tragic. So Data decides to ask around. He tries talking to an Estelle Getty impersonator at the slot machines. She completely ignores him. There's a lot of NPCs in this episode, non-playable characters, but it seems like there's only a handful of them that the crew can actually talk to. So in that regard, it is actually kind of like a video game. Worf also tries to push a random wall for some reason, and he even shoots at it with a phaser, but nothing happens. So their weapons appear to be useless as well, which is a shame because it would be nice if they could stun this jealous bellhop. He's now showing off a gun and once again talking about how he's going to make Mickey D leave Rita alone. He says Mickey D is nothing. Obviously, he's a Burger King fan. I don't know what else to tell you. I mean, oh man. And it seems Geordi was able to achieve some penetration, probably for the first time in his life. The signal is weak, but the away team gets a hail from Picard, and Riker explains that they can't get out of the hotel. So they're still trapped, but at least they can communicate with the Enterprise. I guess that's progress. And Data reports that he's detected human DNA on the floor above them. Worf says perhaps these turbo lifts can take them there, referring, of course, to the very standard elevators or lifts. He's going to be pretty shocked at how slow it is when he gets in it. And they make their way to one of the rooms, and they find a human corpse laying in bed. It's basically just a skeleton. Riker says it looks like the poor devil died in his sleep. And Worf says, what a terrible way to die, which is funny because for a Klingon, that is a terrible way to die. And he's apparently been dead for 283 years. And Data says the lack of any advanced decomposition is due to the sterile environment. What do you mean lack of decomposition, Data? This is the deadest man I've ever seen. I mean, if you dug up the body of Leonardo da Vinci right now, I bet you he would look better than this guy does. And they find a spacesuit hanging in the closet, which has an American flag patch on it, and there are 52 stars. And Riker says that would mean it's from somewhere between 2033 and 2079 AD. No idea why he bothers to say AD. I mean, why was he that specific? I mean, were there United States astronauts back in 2033 BC? In the world of Star Trek, I guess anything's possible. And the name on the spacesuit says Colonel S. Ritchie. It's from 2037. It was the third manned attempt to leave the solar system. And he and his crew obviously got lost, which is putting it mildly. They find a novel in the night table drawer, and it's called the Hotel Royale. Data reads it very quickly, much like Johnny Five consuming input.
More input, Stephanie, more!
And he says the book is about compulsive gamblers in a hotel casino, and Mickey D is the main villain of the story. So this novel is the basis for everything going on in this place. And they also discover a diary written by Colonel Ritchie. There's only one entry, and it says that an alien virus infected and killed his crew. And the aliens who discovered them presumed that this novel was the basis for their preferred lifestyle. So it created this living space on this planet so that Colonel Ritchie would be comfortable. Obviously not understanding that it's just a work of fiction and a badly written one at that. As Ritchie himself puts it, it's filled with endless cliché and shallow characters. And the diary goes on to say that Ritchie will welcome death when it comes. I mean, this is like me being stuck in a story written by Alex Kurtzman. It sounds like a hellscape. I don't know why these aliens didn't just ask this guy what this book is all about. I mean, they can recreate this fictional world so completely, but they can't just try to communicate? I don't really get it. But in any case, their apology to Ritchie for killing his crew obviously turned out to be a curse. And suddenly, the phone rings, and Worf answers, and he says this.
There is a female voice asking if we want room service.
I believe she is asking if we want the room cleaned.
Tell her no.
No.
What did she say?
She said the kitchen will be open 24 hours if we change our minds.
Okay, so now you're telling me they don't know what room service is? I'm almost positive that the term room service has been used in other Star Trek shows. I just feel like there's so many vacation planets in Star Trek. It has to be a term that people are familiar with. But at any rate, Riker informs the Enterprise of their recent discoveries, and Picard decides to sit down and read the Hotel Royale novel. He actually seems to be listening to an audiobook of it, so that's nice. We'll come back to that later. In the meantime, the away team heads back to the casino, and the Texas dude with no DNA is really trying hard to bang this dumb lady. She's playing blackjack, of course, and her cards add up to 13. And somehow, Data tells her that the odds favor standing pat. Now, I'm not a blackjack player by any means, but the object of the game is to get your cards to add up to 21 or as close to it as possible without going over. I mean, 13 is a shitty hand in blackjack. You're probably not going to win if you don't ask for another card. It's risky, as is anything in gambling. And of course, Data was right. She doesn't take his advice. She says, hit me, and she busts. If I'm using the terminology correctly. If I'm not, I apologize. I guess Data just plays by different rules than the rest of us. I don't know. And then suddenly Mickey D shows up. We finally get a look at this fuckhead. And he is like the king of the douchebags. I mean, just look at him. He has a brief argument with the bellhop before suggesting they take it outside. And once the bellhop turns his back, Mickey D shoots him. And I'm a little surprised that Worf didn't just run up to him and snap his fucking neck for being so dishonorable. And did this bellhop have a name? I'm just going to call him Arby's at this point. And then Mickey D leaves, somehow. The revolving door seems to work for him at least. And Picard tells the away team that the novel ends with the hotel getting bought out by 3 foreign investors. So it seems that the away team is playing the role of the foreign investors. But obviously, they don't have enough money to buy the hotel yet. So Data decides that he's going to win the money by playing craps, which is odd. I mean, of all the casino games, it seems like that would be the toughest for Data to, cheat at. There's no cards to count. But maybe it's bigger money, so I guess it's more efficient. Who knows? But before he gets started, he explains the ins and outs of the game, which is pretty boring. And then he discovers that the dice is improperly balanced. The game is rigged, essentially. But Data repairs the dice by squishing them in his hand, apparently. I guess that works. And then he starts winning tons of money over and over. And for some reason, the Texas dude and his reluctant lady friend are acting like they're winning money too. Like why are they celebrating? Who knows? And what's even more confusing is that the Texas dude suddenly turns on a dime and decides he's going to bet against Data. And he loses all his money. And then he takes it personal, like he blames Data. Needless to say, this guy is kind of a joke. And they eventually win enough money to buy the hotel. I guess a verbal agreement is enough to get that accomplished. And now that they own the place, they're free to leave. They walk through the revolving door and beam back to the Enterprise. Riker talks with Picard and he says none of it makes any sense. And I completely agree. I mean, what the fuck was this episode? And what kind of story is this book? Like, what? The villain gets away. He's fine. The hotel gets bought. And that's the climax of the story? I mean, it sounds like the worst book ever written. Which I guess is the point. That's what they were going for. But it's just so bizarre. Overall, it's not a great episode. But I do kind of enjoy the silliness of it. I don't know what the point of it was. If I had to guess, I'd say it's that a terrible story can literally kill you. But in actuality, it's just kind of one of those early TNG episodes where nothing really gets resolved. The crew is safe, but we never find anything about the aliens that did this to Colonel Ritchie. They just kind of leave and there's no answers. And TNG does that from time to time, especially early on. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes the mystery is part of the fun and part of what keeps you thinking. And other times it just feels kind of lazy. I think this episode, unfortunately, is the latter. It's kind of like Justice in season 1. Yeah, the crew is safe, but we never learn anything about the interdimensional alien entity hovering over that planet. And it's weird because the Royale kind of reminds me a little bit of 2001: A Space Odyssey. I know that's weird, but especially the hotel room scene. Like, if Dr. Bowman didn't turn into the Star Child at the end of the movie, this is probably how he would have ended up. I don't know. The visuals of that scene really remind me of 2001. And I think that's kind of what they were going for. It also might be worth mentioning that at the start of the episode, Picard is looking at Fermat's last theorem, a nearly 400-year-old math equation that remained unsolved until the mid-90s. Except in this episode, it's still unsolved. And it's obviously because this aired 5 years before it was solved. So that's kind of funny. It's one of those Star Trek predictions that didn't actually work out. And this episode was directed by Cliff Bole. He directed 25 episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation, 10 episodes of Deep Space Nine, and 7 episodes of Voyager. I knew he directed a bunch of Star Trek episodes, but I had no idea it was that many. And the Royale might not be his best work, but his best work is one of the best Star Trek episodes ever, The Best of Both Worlds, Part 1 and 2. So this guy's a legend. And the Bolian race is actually named after him. And I think that's pretty cool. But at this point, I'm just rambling again. So I'll wrap this up. Let me know what you think of the Royale. And until next time, take it easy.
None of it makes any sense. Like Fermat's theorem, it's a puzzle we may never solve.